Hi guys, welcome to Small Farm Life. Hope you all have an awesome day and you haven't been too worried about what's been going on over the last week or so. I know I haven't. And in today's video guys, I want to talk about things you should look at before you think about buying some land anywhere in the UK. Especially if you want to live on that land. Maybe you want to live on the land off grid, maybe you want to be connected to the grid, but you want to live on some land, maybe it's agricultural land, or maybe it's woodland, or some scrubland. Could be a small parcel of land, could be a large parcel of land. But if you're going to go down the route of trying to live off grid, there's two ways you can do it. There's the way of buying some land and putting in planning applications to try and get the right to live on that land. And the chances of getting the right to live on that land are almost zero, unless the land is in a perfect area for development. And if it already is in a perfect area, then the developers will have been long ago to try and buy that land and develop that land. And the second way is by moving onto some land like you've purchased and just going for it, and you'll deal with everything as it comes along. Now, I have made a video about buying land and what you should look out for when you're buying land, and I'll name some of them things in this video. But I get lots of emails, lots of messages of people who have bought some land and they've moved onto the land already, and then they're finding it hard to deal with the local planning department, enforcement officers, and then the locals as well. Now, I would say, for starters, if you're the type of person that gets really worried really quickly, maybe you get anxious, maybe you get depressed because things aren't happening how you want them to happen, and you maybe lose sleep at night worrying about these things, I would suggest you don't go down the route of buying land and just moving on that land, because you are going to have a battle on your hands to stay there if people find out that you're there. It's just a fact. But life itself is a battle. You're always up against the odds when you're going through life, aren't you? And what I think's crazy is if you leave school, get a job, stay in the same job for 20, 30 years to pay off a mortgage, and if you don't keep that job, then you'll be evicted from your house and they'll take the house off you and the bank will get the house. And the same goes for rent accommodation. If you don't keep up with the rent, you'll be kicked out of that property. Where if you buy land for cash with your savings or whatever you might have available to purchase some land, doesn't matter if it's an acre or it's 10 acres, if you move onto that land, the chances of somebody physically dragging you off that land and the bailiffs coming to throw you off that land are almost zero. I don't know of anybody who's been dragged off their land. Now, people live in all types of different buildings. So some people live in a shed quite happily, because a shed of this size, which is 7 meters by 4 meters, can suit a couple down to the ground and can be very nice to live in, depending on how you do the interior out. It doesn't matter what it looks like on the outside. And if it fits in with the local community and the local area and that sort of thing, the scenery of the local area, then you'll probably have little or any pushback off locals and the local plan department. And I'm not saying you won't get an enforcement letter, but them enforcing that letter is almost zero, honestly guys. But like I say, if you're really worried about living on your own land and somebody going to be throwing you off that land, then don't do it, because you've got to have a can-do attitude and you've got to have a go-for-it attitude. If you've got those things and you're not worried easily, you're just going to plod along and build up your land and your farm or your small business or whatever it might be that you're doing on that land, or just an off-grid lifestyle, then just go for it and deal with everything one step at a time. Don't worry about it and lose sleep over it. It's not worth it. You'll just mess with your health and that sort of thing. Now, before you go out and buy land, think of what type of land you want. Do you want some woodland? Do you want some agricultural land? Now, woodland, you may be able to hide out there a lot easier than you would on an open piece of countryside, agricultural land or something like that. Maybe you want a bit of both. But think about what type of land you actually want to buy, and then after that, think about how much land you want to buy also, because it doesn't matter that you've got 100 acres or 1 acre. You don't have no more right to live on 100 acres than you do on 1 acre. Now, you might get permitted development rights when you get over 12.5 acres, but apart from that, you've got no more right to stay on that land than somebody who has 1 acre or less. I know people who've got the right to stay on 1/8 of an acre. Now, some people want to buy land where it's got agricultural and woodland and also a little brownfield site. And a little brownfield site, when it comes to buying land in the countryside, is just a small site that might have had a barn on it, or it's still got a barn on there, or some stables or something like that, or some other building on the hard standing. And that's just classed as developed land in the past. And most of these sites have already had planning applications put in for them to be converted into a residential dwelling. Now, you can check out if a piece of land you're looking at, which has a brownfield site on it, has it had any planning applications put in for the buildings to be converted into residential. And you can check this out on the local planning portal of the area that you're looking to buy the land in. And it might have had 5 planning applications in the past to be converted into residential dwellings. I know the properties just behind me had around about 60 planning applications for all different types of conversions. The majority of them were refused, and then it got converted into 3 separate dwellings. But they had lots of ideas to convert it into flats and all sorts of things. But it's in a country setting, so it wasn't going to be allowed. And if you're looking at development an old brownfield site, then you might be able to see what was missing in them planning applications and why those planning applications got refused. But sometimes there's no planning applications being put in, and it could be just a small building that you're looking at on this brownfield site. But if you put a planning application in to convert that building into a residential building, you can add a little extension onto it, something that might be in keeping with the local area. And if it's got good access and it's got utilities and all that sort of stuff, maybe a bus route going past it, then that'll be looked at as a good area to be converted into a residential dwelling. Now, just because you've got a building on some brownfield land on your land doesn't mean to say you ever get planning permission to convert that into a dwelling. But it's a lot easier than doing it from scratch anyway, guys. Now, before you actually get into the motions of buying land, you want to do quite a few checks on that land to make sure it suits you and suits your needs. So not only do you want to think about, is it woodland or is it agricultural land you want? You want to think, do you want to be connected to the grid or do you want to be off grid? Now, if you want to be connected to the grid, you need to understand where the utilities are in relation to the land that you're looking to buy, because that's going to determine how much it's going to cost to get utilities to the land. And then you're going to have to deal with wheel leaves to cross people's land if utilities aren't right at the roadside or something like that. Now, if you're going off grid, you'll need to worry about where the water table is and how deep it is. And if you can figure out how deep it is, you can get a rough estimate of how much it would cost to dig a well and put the filtration system in and all that. And then where's the land placed, as in south facing or north facing, because south facing is going to be better for solar and that sort of thing. Maybe you'll get better wind from westerly areas, but south facing is what people go for. So you don't want to be on the north face of a hill, you want to be on the opposite side, on the south face of the hill. And then you want to think about, do you want flat ground, do you want hilly ground, that sort of thing, and does the ground itself flood in the winter time? Because there's no point in having land and buying land that might flood in certain times of the year, and you can easily check that out in this day and age with the flood zone maps and all that sort of thing. So check that out, make sure you're not buying land that you can only access 6 months of the year. Make sure that at least some of the land is not going to be flooded or boggy all year round. Now, when you go and look at land to buy, make sure you're actually looking at the land you're going to be buying. Now, the best way to do this, obviously, is speak to the seller. And the best way, I think, to go out and buy land is get your feet on the street, so to speak, and go out and speak to potential sellers. Just go out and meet locals in the area you're looking at buying land. And that's how most land is sold in the UK. It's not sold through agents and land agents. Some of it is, but 90% of it isn't. It's sold to people who know the owners of that land. And you want to be one of those people if you're looking at buying land. So get out in your local area and meet people who might own land and might be willing to sell a piece of it, even though they haven't thought of it in the past. They might be willing to sell a certain area of land that they own that they never use, but they've never thought about selling it in the past. And you'll get it cheaper, and you'll get it without clawbacks and covenants and that sort of thing. If the person doesn't speak to agents who put this in the seller's head most of the time, you want to get it with no restrictions and that sort of thing. And that's another thing. You want to make sure that land you're buying doesn't have any covenants, restrictive covenants on that land, doesn't have any clawbacks on the land. So if you do eventually get the right to stay on the land, residential permission, then the land value will go through the roof. And if it goes through the roof and you owe 50% clawback, that means if the land goes up to say 200 grand and you only paid 50 grand for the land, well, you owe the seller who sold you the land £75,000. That's not what you want to be doing. You want to basically buy land with no clawbacks on whatsoever. So everything you put into the land, you're going to get back, whether it be the increase in the value of your land and all the effort you've put in there and that sort of thing. Now, when it comes to planning permission for land, how easy it is to get planning permission will determine on what type of land you actually buy. So there's different classifications of land, not just agricultural, brownfield, greenfield, I don't know, woodland and that sort of thing. But there's also area of outstanding natural beauty. So land that's in an area of outstanding natural beauty, a conservation area of historical importance. And these bits of land get sold all the time. And if people aren't looking deep into what they're actually buying, then they can miss these sorts of things. The land could have a blanket Article 3 over the land, which is something that the council put on an area that might be beautiful, but it's not in an area of outstanding natural beauty. Now, an Article 3 is put on land to stop people from claiming the permitted development rights. So any people that have got 12.5 acres or more get permitted development rights, where they have to put a prior application notice in to the council for a barn or something like that. They don't have to put a full plan application in, but they still need to provide a need for that building and what they want it for, that sort of thing. Now, when there's an Article 3 on the land, every person who wants to build anything, doesn't matter how much land you own, if you have permitted development rights or not, has to put in a full plan application. And you can look on the local planning authority in the area that you're looking to buy land in and check to see if any plan applications have been passed for the sort of buildings you want to build on land with Article 3 notices on the land. And that'll give you a good idea of what the council in that area is like, and will they allow buildings to be built on that land with planning permission, full planning permission, because there's no point in buying land that you can't build anything on, is there, really? Now, there's other things you want to be looking out for when you're looking to buy land. And one of the big things that people don't even think about, because they drive up an access track in most instances and go and view some land. And the person selling the land will say, oh yeah, that's the vehicle access down that track. But not all vehicle access is put on title deeds. And the reason it isn't put on title deeds in some cases is because a person has just been allowed to use an access track from a neighbouring farmer or something like that. They might have had access to the field in the past, but they've never used that access because it comes straight off a main road or something like that. So they've been using a farmer's access track, and the farmer has allowed it. But maybe it was only for the last 7 years, 10 years or something like that. And if it hasn't been for the last 20 years, then you don't have an automatic right to vehicle access over that track. And you have to prove it's been used by the landowner for the last 20 years so it can be put on your title deeds, so to speak. So if you buy some land and the seller just says, oh yeah, you can use an access track, you need to ask that seller, is that going to be put in the title deeds? And how much do I pay towards the upkeep and maintenance of that access track? Now, the farmer does not have to let you use that access track. They could say, no, that's getting sold, I'll let that seller use the access track because this and this, but I'm not giving access to anybody else who buys that land. And then you think, it's okay because I've got an access point that has never been used for the last 10, 15 years. Well, you can go and put in a plan application and try and get that access point opened again. But in lots of cases, and I see this all the time around where I am, where old access points to fields are no longer usable because there's been a new road put in or the road's been upgraded and they haven't been used for the last 20, 30 years, and the council would not acknowledge a new access point from that area. So you need to put in a full plan application to get a new access point created, but councils will refuse those new plan applications for access points because they'll say the road's too dangerous or something like that. It could be near a bend, and because planning laws change and the highways agency has a lot to say in what new access points are created, then they can not support your plan application and you might not get that new access point. Now, if it's on a B road or a country lane somewhere, the chances are you'll probably get a new access point. But if it's on an A road, it's going to be really hard to do so, especially if it's a fast A road. You see some of these houses built on the side of motorways and you think, how did they get an access point for that house? Well, it's because the motorway came after the house. That's simply how it was done. Now, you might also want to think about where your local amenities are to the land that you're looking to buy. Obviously, if you've got kids and you're looking at buying some land and you want all the family to move on that land with you, then you need to know where your local supermarket is, where the hospital is, where the doctors are, where schools are, all that sort of stuff. You need to know where your local petrol station is because you're going to run out of petrol. And you need to know that it's in a good area with good amenities, especially if you do eventually get the right for residential permission, because that's a big part of being granted residential permission. Now, guys, I'm sure there's a lot more things to think about when looking at buying land in the UK to live on, especially if you're not going down the route of claiming planning permission or trying to put in a plan application at the very beginning. Now, if you do that, I'm telling you now, it will take years, if not a decade, and that doesn't mean to say you're going to get planning permission passed. Or you can just get on and do it and then see where the road takes you. But what I will say is you'll save a hell of a lot of money on rent and mortgages by living on land. Even if you only live there for 3-4 years, you might find that you don't like living off grid and you don't like being self-sufficient in so much. So you might want to move back into rented accommodation. So you don't know where life's going to take you and you don't know what life's going to throw up at you. So guys, think about these things before you go out and just buy land to live an off-grid lifestyle or a little bit more of a freedom lifestyle. So they say we're free in this country, but we still have to follow basic rules and regulations. But we don't have to follow all this stupid red tape they throw in front of us, honestly, guys. Anyway, if you like the video, guys, hit the like button. If you want to subscribe, and you should subscribe, hit the subscribe button. If you want to be notified of more upcoming videos, hit the bell button. My name's Craig. You've been watching The Small Farmer Life. Thanks again to all my patrons. Couldn't thank you guys enough. And YouTube members, really appreciate the support. Till next time, guys, make sure you take care of yourself. Most of all, take care of the family. Be genuine, guys. Bye for now. See you.